welcome back to the Get Set podcast, an old girls entertainment production where neoteric meets nostalgia. We're back for season 5 of the pod and just in time for Oscars week. If you've recently found us, welcome. We're a podcast demystifying the idea of an overnight success while highlighting the array of diverse jobs within the industry with a focus on women in the film and TV space. Today, it's your co-host here, Monique Schwaneman and
Jessica Payne, and we couldn't do Oscars week right without having some nominees. So this week we are bringing you episodes of Oscar-nominated filmmakers, starting with the creators of the 2026 Oscar-nominated live-action short film Jane Austen's period drama. We have Julia Axe, We have Julia Axe, Steve Pinder, and Ellie Le-ger-ski. And Steve and Julia are the co-directors, co-writers. Julia stars in the film, and Ellie is the producer.
Steve and Julia have collaborated on numerous musical comedy sketches and have most recently, obviously, directed the Oscar-qualifying short film Jane Austen's period drama, a satire about menstruation that took the festival circuit by storm. Julia rose to internet fame when her parody of Ariana Grande's 7 Rings went viral, even being reposted by the Queen, Ariana herself. She also has a lush performing career with LA Opera, LA Maratha Theater, Boston Court Theater, 3D Theatricals, and the Independent Shakespeare Company. She has sung on many soundtracks, including John Wick 3, where she is the featured vocalist.
Steve has a background in acting, a master's in film and television production from USC, and most recently starred in a feature film, Exorcism of St. Patrick, directed by Quinn Armstrong. Julia and Steve live in LA, where they are currently developing several feature-length projects, including Jane Austen's period drama and a musical set in space.
And we have Ellie. As a University of Utah alum, she moved to LA in 2013 after she was recruited to work in the film finance office at Creative Artists Agency. She has since produced over 20 productions. What? And is a member of the Producers Guild of America, aka the PGA. Her projects have premiered at a few little-known festivals such as Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, Outfest, and more.
Yes, welcome once again the team of the Jane Austen period drama.
Hold up. Speaking of projects, Jess and I are crowdfunding for our first feature.
That's right, our 1970s period piece about how my mom was denied a line of credit simply for being a woman.
And then writing a news-breaking article about it in her local paper before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act passes is coming to be.
Yep, and you can visit the link in our show notes or in our Instagram bio of Old Girls Entertainment to see how you can share and get involved and be a part of our Seed and Spark campaign.
So please go do that. And now we're back to our normally scheduled programming.
That's right. It's a good one.
Before we get into the period of it all, in your own words, who are you and where do you call home?
I guess I'll go first. I'm Julia Axe. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley in LA, and I never left. So I'm still based here.
I'm Steve Pinder. I live in LA with my fiance, Barrett Hutchinson, but I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a Midwestern boy through and through.
And I'm Ellie Le-ger-ski, and I also live in Los Angeles, but I call the Wild West my home. I grew up in Wyoming and Colorado, lived in Utah for a while, so now I'm the most West I can possibly be by being in California.
Wow. And all plans to all of you stay locally here then?
Yes.
And collaborate on more and more.
We'll see how this all goes,
Well, true. Well, we could all get up and go to Europe tomorrow, so that's also fine as well.
That would be ideal.
Get on the same flight. Okay. So we'd love to know, we know a little bit about your bios, but what was like your first job in the industry and how that like gave you that little bug? Julia, how did you, coming from the San Fernando Valley, you're just like, I'm in LA, I want to be an entertainer.
Well, I actually, in hindsight, don't know how much being in the Valley was like the entertainment industry. Like we were the porn capital of the world in Chatsworth, which for the record, I never partook in. That was over in Chatsworth. Wow, this is already just going way off the rails more than I thought it would.
No, that was where me and my husband were looking for apartments. And it was, have you been to that one on, have you heard of it? It's in Sherman Oaks, actually. It was like a compound. And we went in and they're like, this is I feel like this is where they filmed all those sex. Like, this is a community of of porn production, and I'm like, okay, well, it's affordable, so let's consider it, babe. Everyone's an artist.
You need to bleach everything, but
right, correct.
That.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been there. Is that where you live now?
No.
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't let me. No.
That's okay. Good. Probably.
Yeah.
No, my parents were both classical musicians. My dad's a cellist and a conductor, and he worked at Cal State Northridge as a professor. So, which is in Northridge in the Deep Valley. And my mom is a pianist and started her own company called Opera Works, which trained opera singers in a very sort of holistic, positive way. And so I always grew up around really opera singers. Since I was born, I would go with my parents to rehearsals and I would fall asleep in the piano cover in the corner. So I feel like I kind of osmosis got a lot of these operas in my brain. So singing was really the most obvious first step. I could sing, or I was singing since I was a little kid. And then I'm also an only child. So I was always kind of a bit of a ham, shall we say. And then I went to drama camp.
I entertain everyone. Yeah,
because I got to get the attention somehow. I went to drama camp when I was 13 at Northridge, and the first time I remember being realizing maybe I could make people laugh was when I got cast in a production of Midsummer Night's Dream at drama camp as Helena, because I'm quite tall as well, and Helena it's in the text that she's taller than Hermia. And I remember being so upset because I really did not want to be in that play. And I really wanted to be Sebastian in The Little Mermaid. And I'm really glad that didn't happen for a number of reasons at this point that I didn't quite understand when I was 13. But I remember for some reason when I was in Midsummer Night's Dream, taking this sort of classic text and putting my 13-year-old Valley spin on it. And people just thought people really enjoyed that. And I remember I made people laugh, and it was that was the first time I remember making an audience laugh. And I think back on that now, considering what Jane Austen's period drama is, and that's sort of been a through line in almost everything I've done, which is to take something very classic and bridge it to our modern worlds. So anyway, just thinking about those roots recently. And so then I studied singing and acting, and I just loved it. I loved it. And I was talented enough at it that people kept encouraging me to do it. And so I went to CSUN, very local, very affordable, and studied music, theater, and dance with the intention of becoming an opera singer, which I did pursue immediately out of college. Although my first gig out of college was playing Ula in a production of The Producers at a dinner theater, which also kind of tracks with the through line of everything we're making now. And I just kind of kept going. I pursued opera. I ended up singing with the LA Opera, like you said, and that was going well. And I was in musicals, and that was going well. And I did TV and film, and that was going well. And I just loved all of it. But there was always this, I took odd jobs along the way. I think I worked at office. I tried to work, I worked Office Max for 2 weeks, and it's just not. I didn't.
You're I just need free copies of my headshots and resume.
And I did a lot of background work right out of college, a lot, and just to I wanted to have the experience of being on big sets, the biggest productions, to kind of demystify that. It's a great way to start.
It's a great way to start.
And I would kind of ask if I could stay later, even after they released us, and just watch. And most of the time they said yes. So I just got to hang out on all these incredible sets with these incredible people for a while. And I always wanted to direct. I knew that deep down, and I just never had time or was a little scared to pursue it. And so, is this going on too long? Should I keep going?
You're good.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. But Steve, you're up next, so get ready. You're on deck.
Yeah, I'm gonna popcorn it to you when you least expect it, Steve. So be ready. So anyway, I was singing and dancing and acting. Well, dancing less so, but singing and acting. And one day I made this very silly video of singing Ariana Grande's Seven Rings, but as Julie Andrews, because it turns out I can kind of sound like Julie Andrews when I sing, a skill I discovered on the first project where Steve and I met. And that went viral. And then that began a slew of other sketch and musical comedy stuff, some of which also went viral immediately after that. And I was like, oh, this is finally everything that I wanted to do, which was pop music, pop culture, internet culture, comedy, and classical singing. And that was the thing that kind of took off and gave me the kick in the pants to pursue being a creator first and foremost, more than anything. And I'm sure more on that later, but Popcorn Steve.
Julia and I have surprisingly similar backgrounds in terms of childhood and performance. And I was also sort of a hammy kid, loved trying to make my mom laugh, who's this kind of reserved British woman. I used to like watch Jim Carrey movies and then do Jim Carrey impersonations to get her to break. And it was really fun. I was also a child singer. So Julia and I have actually both done a production of Amal and the Night Visitors, which is like this like operetta that, you know, if you're in a certain kind of music community and you're a decent child singer, somebody's going to throw you into Amal and the Night Visitors. Somebody's going to have you do it. It's like a Christmas operetta.
Also, to be clear, we both sang the role of Amal, which is a young boy.
Yeah, which is a young boy. Yeah. A young Middle Eastern boy, to be clear.
Yeah, lots of
also maybe
spot on cast.
Yeah. So anyway, grew up doing a lot of performance stuff, and then when I went to high school, I got really scared. Puberty was really scary for me, and I sort of backed away from performing. And toward the end of high school, I kind of started to get back into it, and then college, I really started to get into it. So that after college, I moved to Chicago and I started doing musical theater, and that was sort of my first entrance into entertainment land. And my first show was, I played younger brother in Ragtime, which was like just an incredible experience, a really good part for me at that time, and just a life-changing experience just in terms of like, oh, I can do this. I can book a part, and I can have, I have a place here in this world and in these spaces. And then after a couple of years of that, I sort of started to realize, like, I did a production of Les Mis at a dinner theater, which was a wonderful experience. But it was in this year when the rights to Les Mis was suddenly available to regional theaters, and everyone was auditioning for Les Mis in the Midwest. And I was like, oh my God, if I continue down this path, I'm going to do Les Mis for the rest of my life. I'm going to be on that barricade until the end of my days. And that just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I was so interested in new work and things that were coming out on Broadway that I didn't have access to. And ultimately, like, my true love for storytelling medium is film. And I just didn't know how to I was like, how do I get over there? How do I switch lanes? And if that's really what I want to be doing and really the world that I want to be part of. It felt so, I think growing up in Indiana, in Indianapolis, it felt so inaccessible. It's like, I don't know, who does that when you're born in Indiana? I also think somehow there's a culture in the Midwest of sort of keeping people small. I have a great friend out here in LA with me, who's also we went to the same high school, and then he moved out here a year after I did or so. And we talk about that. Like, it's not like people are like, don't follow your dreams. People do tell you to follow your dreams, but somehow you still internalize that it's like not possible somehow, that it's not possible for you to leave the Midwest and really go after the true desire of your heart or whatever. But when I was in Chicago doing theater, I started directing some stage stuff, and I started thinking about writing for film and writing short films in particular. I started to just have random little ideas, and I went to New York to stay with a friend and to think about applying to grad school for performance. And while I was there, my friend was hearing me talk about these short film ideas I had. She was like, well, it seems like you might be interested in film. And I was like, no, I mean, I can't, no, they won't let me. There's no, it doesn't matter if I'm interested. Like, I can't do it. I don't have any experience doing it. She was like, why don't you go check out NYU's film program? Why don't you look at their application and see what you think? And she sort of convinced me that, grad schools, at least in film, are interested in people with diverse backgrounds. They know they can teach you the technical skills. if you want to learn them, they can teach you that stuff. What they can't teach you is voice and point of view, and they can't give you stories to tell, So I applied to some film schools and I got into USC, and so then I went to USC for grad school, and it felt like such a huge leap into this world that I always deep down wanted to be a part of, and sort of felt like was the space where I would truly find belonging in the arts. And then through grad school, and that's a whole mess of story, but I sort of fell away from performance. And at USC, you have to study all the different technical facets of filmmaking. And so I found myself for several years like doing some freelance editing, which I really hated, doing some freelance cinematography, which I really hated. And I ultimately found myself at the end of my time at USC, I was like, I still don't have, because I did my undergrad in classical singing and English lit. At the end of my undergrad or my grad school time, I was like, I still don't have acting training. Like I still don't know I don't have a technique. I have intuition, and I have a good feeling that I run on when I try to perform, but I don't have training. So I found a little Meisner-based studio in LA called the Elizabeth Messnick Acting Studio. And I started training there while I was finishing my grad degree. And after my time training there, I went on and I trained to teach, and I started teaching acting because it felt closer to directing. It felt closer to where my passions really were. And yeah, and then all this Jane Austen period drama stuff has sort of, I don't know, grown out of all that time there, and here we are.
Wow. We so many follow-up questions,
journey.
But let's throw it over. No, yeah, Ellie, let us know. Where do you call home? Where are you from?
Well, so I grew up in very small towns in Wyoming and Colorado, and not a single person in my community or family or anybody I knew was interested in movies except for me. So it was just like, and I grew up with a single mother, and she was also very ill a lot of the time. So there was a lot of time where my brother and I were sort of like babysitting ourselves and like taking care of ourselves from a very early age. And so very naturally, and we couldn't afford cable, so it was always movies. We were always allowed to rent whatever movies we wanted.
Blockbuster.
Yeah, I was going to say, at the Blockbuster in Pueblo, Colorado, it was like every couple of days I would go. And it like truly, when Netflix started delivering DVDs, that opened up my whole world, because it was like I had rented all the movies that I wanted to rent at that Blockbuster. And again, like my parents never really supervised me, so I was allowed to watch all the rated R movies, all the Oscar nominees that those years. Like I was always very interested in places that nobody cared. And similarly to Julia and Steve, I was also a theater kid, so I knew that I liked entertainment. But film just always seemed so inaccessible, because again, like I was just never around people that even went to the theater. Like I would have to drive myself to the movie theaters to go, and would always, just like, it was something that I was just like, wow, I don't know a single person that can help me out here. But for a couple of years in my childhood, we had lived in Salt Lake City. And so I was aware of Sundance. And so when I was coming out of high school, I was like, well, if I move to New York or LA to try to pursue film school, I'm just going to get eaten alive. But maybe if I go to Salt Lake and like try to like find a job through Sundance, that might work. So I went to the University of Utah, my very first screening of my very first Sundance. And I was just a festival goer. Like I was just an 18-year-old that just had a ticket to the screening. Was Precious by the filmmaker Lee Daniels. And at the time I had a scholarship, and the scholarship required each of the recipients to do an internship in their field of interest. And my mentor at the time was like, you need to, like, her goal for me that Sundance was to get and give out 5 business cards. And this is like the day before the festival. And I was like, what am I going to put on a business card? Like, I'm just an 18-year-old idiot, And I had index cards in my dorm room. I cut them in half, and I just hand wrote my name, phone number, email address on each one. And so anyway, at my very first screening of Sundance, it was Precious. And during the Q&A, I asked a question, and I loved the way that Lee responded to his answer, and he was pretty funny. So I was like, oh, I'm feeling a connection. And then I knew that I had to get this internship before I graduated. And I was like, I might as well ask this guy. And so at the back of the theater, I went up to him and I said, do you have any internship opportunities? And he says, do you live in New York? And I said, yeah, and just totally lied. And he said, very strangely, do you have a card? And I gave him my card and he threw his head back and laughed and he goes, "Oh, this is the cutest shit I've ever seen." And the next day his assistant called me and was like, "Hey, Lee really likes you. Can you start like next week?" And I was like, "Ooh." And this is like January. And like, I knew that I wasn't going to probably be able to do it until the summer because that's obviously when my school break was. So I was able to go out there in the summer and be his intern. So that was my very first, and that was like right before he was nominated. And so like, it was like in this weird space of time. I never got to be on set with him because like, I was his intern like right after Precious was like right before it was released. And then the following, the following few months after that, he was nominated. And then I congratulated him and he was like, "Hey, come back and be my assistant next summer." And we were supposed to go make a feature that never happened. But anyway, totally crazy. And Sundance is still the most magical place for me because needless to say, like the feature that I was going to work with him on didn't work out. So I went back and finished school and all that. And then was an intern for a different film group a couple of years later. And while it was for this film called Anita, which was a whole documentary on the Anita Hill story. And so I was working with that film's team, and we were very grassroots with our marketing. We had these little buttons that just said the name Anita, and I was handing those out at screenings. And this woman who also has giant curly hair came up to me and she was like, "What's your deal?" And it was like right before I was graduating college. And I said, I make movies. And she was like, she's like, "Do you want to learn about the industry? Like, do you really want to learn this industry?" And I was like, "I don't know. I really like making movies with my friends. And she said, "Do you want to come to LA?" And I said, "Not really." And her name is Dina Cooper Stock. She ended up being an agent at CAA. And it was really funny because that night she gave me her card. And when you Google CAA, especially in 2013, nothing comes up on the internet.
Correct.
Like,
Still.
it's just a blank webpage. So I thought it was like a fake company. Like I was like, because like, I don't know if you guys remember like the John Robert Powers and Barbizon, like the weird, I mean, I'd hate to use words, but like those like, they're going to make you famous companies. And so that's what I thought it was. And I went to a party that night with my friend, Jared. And I said, "Yeah, this woman from CAA asked me if I would come work with them." And he was like, "Oh my fucking God, CAA?" He's like, "That's the biggest agency in the world." And I was like, "Who are they?" So anyway, long story short, I got recruited to CAA, and that was my first job in LA. And really like, it was, I mean, like I was so, because like I said, like at the time I was making movies with all my friends in their backyards and stuff and just having so much fun. And that's where I really like learned how to produce and learned that I was naturally good at producing. And I was like, well, maybe I need to learn this. And I am not a good corporate girl. I try as I might. I am just not like, I am not made for getting at a desk at this time to this time and all that stuff. But it was, and it, like in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that was the best grad school I could have asked for. But at the same time, it's such a weird thing to think about because like the year that I moved out here was 2013. And that was the same year that Netflix started doing streaming. Like it was like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. And everyone's like, what? Like they're going to start making their own content. So the whole industry has like dramatically changed, like even, from the time that I was there. So anyway, that was my first, and then I was just dying to always get back into physical production. And so I found my way back. But yeah, those were the two major first jobs.
Wow.
Incredible.
Crazy. I love that everyone has kind of, and we've interviewed two people exchanging saliva, their team as well. And I feel like everyone kind of has this through line of seizing opportunity, like where it comes, like whether it be index cards or, I don't know, like all of it. So how did you all come together? How did this project come together? And how did
you all meet each other?
And how did it get kicked off the ground?
Julia and I met in 2016 while I was at grad school at USC. I was in this class called Media for Social Change, which was like in your second year at USC, there aren't very many classes where you're allowed to write and direct. And I knew I wanted to write and direct. So I found the one class where I could actually write a project and make it. And it was this Media for Social Change class. And the teacher, Jeremy Kagan, he, wanted us to think about how media can change hearts and minds. How you can use a story to affect people and change how they feel about a topic. And most of the people in the class were doing like pretty heavy PSA kind of material. And that's just not me. So I was like, okay, well, I like Stephen Colbert, and I like Jon Stewart, and I like, at the time, really liked Bill Maher. So I was sort of thinking, like, these people all use comedy for social change. You know, they're all talking about social issues. How could I do that in a movie? And I, at the time, didn't even think about the fact that, like, Mel Brooks is one of my, you know, great influences. Monty Python, some of my great, you know, the people that I grew up loving and watching and thinking were hilarious. It didn't even connect to how political they were in a lot of what they made. But so anyway, I ended up writing this Sound of Music parody about climate change because I was really worried about climate change. And it had zombies in it. So it was a very weird project. And a casting director said, I think I know the perfect person for it. And she introduced me to Julia. And sure enough, Julia was the perfect person for it. So that's how we met. She came in and auditioned, and she just knocked it out of the park. And then the making of that film, of that little short sketch, it was really just a sketch. When we worked together, it was just like every single scene that I had imagined, she knew how to make better. You know, it was like she knew what I was trying to do, and she could help. Like, I would have this sort of imperfect idea. It was an idea of the thing, but it was like not. It was like 80% of the way there, and she would know how to spin it that extra 20% and really make it work. And so that was the beginning. And then you want to take from there?
Yeah, from my end as an actor auditioning for a lot of student films at the time, like, I somehow at that point even knew myself enough and knew the types of things that I wanted to do, that when Steve sent me the script for that crazy project,
With original songs.
With original songs and everything.
By Alex Winkler, who's still the composer for Jane Austen's period drama.
Yeah, so incredible composer. You know, when you're an actor auditioning for student films, I think, or at least for me, the hope was to find collaborators or filmmakers that I could like grow with, that I really jived with, not in any sort of arbitrary way, in a really organic way. And it's happened, I can count the times on one hand where, particularly with student filmmakers, I got sent a script or a scene and I was like, this, I know how to do this, I'm excited about this. And if they don't cast me in this, then I don't know what the fuck they're looking for. Again, those times were few and far between, but Dawn of the Dumb was one of those times. And I got really, really excited about meeting Steve and working with him, because I was like, oh, could this be like a collaborator? And as Steve said, it was just such a joyous time of collaboration. I loved working with him as a him as a director and me as an actor. I love the culture of collaboration he made on that project. And we just played off each other so well that it was, to this day, one of the most satisfying, initial projects I'd ever worked on. And then we met Ellie. So anyway, that's how Steve and I met. And then when I started to go viral and make sketch and musical comedy, Steve was one of the first calls I made to be like, do you want to come make weird stuff for YouTube for some reason? And thankfully he said yes. And we had transformed his apartment into many things. Hogwarts,
many things.
7 Rings,
Casablanca.
Anyway, great time. And that was the time where he and I really honed our like co-directorship. Our collaboration kind of found its way through there, all again in kind of taking these sort of classic things and putting a funny spin on them. And then when the time came to do Jane Austen's period drama, which is our first narrative foray together, we wanted to find something that we could be more cinematic with, that would kind of help us grow outside of the social media space. We were like, oh, we should get a producer, because instead of doing everything ourselves, my husband, who's also a filmmaker, he's like, you should really get a producer if you want to do this right. And so we had met this wonderful woman named Kristen Uno, who we were really interested in working with her on this, but she was tied up with another feature. She was like working on a feature that had just won the Tribeca. What is it? Like the $1 million grant? Yeah, the Untold Stories. So she's like, I am not going to have time to work on this, but let me recommend a couple people to you. And in her email to us, she listed a handful of producers that she highly recommended, but it was very coded that she really, really wanted us to meet with Ellie. And so we're like, well, let's start at the top of the list. And so we met with Ellie, and it was one of the first things Ellie said was like, I'm not a Jane Austen girly. And we're like, that's actually perfect. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's how we met. We recently found a photo of like one of the early times we started working on this project together a
I
couple
think it
years
was
ago.
day one of prep.
Was
Our
it?
little,
Oh,
I think
that's
it was. Yeah. Because I
Yeah,
weirdly
so we need that
remember
photo.
that jacket.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was
I'll get
a
it. Yeah, we
cute
can do that.
photo. Because when my friend Kristen, because Kristen is such a powerhouse producer herself. So like when she even recommended me, I was like, oh my God, she thinks I'm a good producer. Because anyway, she's incredible. And so she told me about it. And I was the head of production for a very long time for this program called Rising Voices, which is an amazing initiative for BIPOC filmmakers. And we did 5 years. I was head of production for 4 of those years. And they award $100,000 to 10 different BIPOC filmmakers so they can make a short film. And so at that point, I think I had just finished year 3. So I had done like 30 short films at that point. And again, not as a producer, but as head of production, which is a very different role, obviously. But at the time that she recommended this to me, I was like, God, I just don't think I have short films in me anymore. And she was like, I think you should read the script. I think you'll really like the script. And then it was like my birthday weekend. And I really it took me a couple days to get around to it. And then I read it and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, okay, never mind. I really do want to do this. And it was just like, if this is my last short film, this is the short film I'm going to do. So anyway, but yeah, that's what
good
I
choice.
Yeah, very good choice. Who could have ever guessed? Who could have ever guessed? And obviously, just meeting Steve and Julia, because a lot of filmmakers, the thing that I really loved about them is that they were, I came to them and I was just like, look, I like your script the way it is. Like, I'm not going to be like a creative person. And especially since you guys are a duo, like, I don't see any service or, good things coming out of me giving you a lot of creative input other than when you ask me for it. And I was like, so like, I just want to make it happen for you. But at the same time, they were, because they were coming from such a DIY filmmaking perspective, they were very curious and they were very like willing to learn and hear about every little thing. And a lot of directors don't care about the production aspect of it all. Like they just like, what they want to know why something happened, but they don't want to know like the bigger picture. And Steve and Julia were always like very, I just remember in one of our offices, like we had, the capability to like project onto a TV. So I remember like literally going line by line through the budget, like projected on a TV screen. And I was like, wow, I have never had fucking directors care about their movies this much, like in this to this detail. Like it's like, unless it's like, a $500 short film and it's like, you literally need to know where every single dollar is going. But it was like just stuff like that. Like I felt very respected as a producer more than I usually had, like working on short film spaces. Because again, like a lot of people just want to get in there and play and they don't really realize, the whole sphere behind it all. And they were, and Steve and Julia were never coming at it from that angle.
It's also really interesting because Ellie, I didn't even know about like the business cards and like the story you told at the beginning here, but it all makes sense. I mean, it really was like the heavens opened up and Ellie came down and worked on this film with us. Not just because she was like, I don't want to have anything to do creative. I want to do your paperwork. And I was like, I didn't know people like you existed in the world. Yeah. Which was a gift, but it's also like her spirit was so compatible with our spirits. Yes. And also taking us to the next level. Like we are historically very scrappy, forward, like problem solvers. And it's just kind of like the do it scared mentality. And Ellie shared that, but also like was very good at keeping us on track and was also very patient with us when we did have a lot of questions. Cause Steve and I both were like, tell us everything, and she was very gracious with her time. It was one of those lucky collaborations that, you get lucky with, I guess.
Yeah. No, we love open communication. It helps everything.
Yeah. Helps everything. It was wild. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know if we want to get into this right now, but it was also really wild because this was 2023 when we filmed and it was right at the beginning of the actor strike. And so it was like the first thing we had to deal with was like, can we even shoot this summer? Because it was like, because when they approached me, it was also like, we want to film this, in the next month. And I was like, well, and this was like late June of 2023. And I think the strike started on July 14th. And so I was like, in those days leading up, like I was like, can we even do this? And we got clearance from SAG. We could only do, there were two different agreements that we could film with. And that was the short film agreement or the student film agreement. We obviously were not eligible for student film. So it was like the whole infrastructure of the production had to be around being compliant with SAG. And so that was an interesting thing to be so beholden from the get-go to a very particular type of production. But again, like it was just such a wild thing that it was like, oh wow, like we already know our parameters, like more so than, you know, a lot of productions can have. And especially like, you know, when people are like, when directors are trying to make, you know, very particular, especially the period piece, like it was like, we cannot exceed this budget level or we're going to be out of compliance with SAG. So anyway, so that was also a very interesting part of our of meeting, because it was like, wow, this like unprecedented event in our industry is like shaping our production.
Yeah, and with those, you know, restrictions sometimes comes out the best creativity, because you know you have to make it in a certain amount, you know, within, you know, a certain prompt. It's sometimes the hardest thing is, you know, if someone just tells you, write me a short story or whatever, you know, you're like, where do I go from here? About what? What do you want? So when you got the script, how long was the script? Because the film itself is a tight 12. So was it a 12-page script, or did you guys have, no, what was it?
No, it was 15 and a half to 16 pages.
Yeah. It was a little longer.
Yeah, we overwrote the dialogue, which turns out is an easy thing to do when you're trying to kind of pay homage to Jane Austen, who's obviously lives in novel land, and we're like, oh, we need a tight short film for 2024. It would have been nice to know that we had overwritten before we shot, because we really could have used those extra hours for other things, I think. But that was something we discovered in the edit room. You know, I think the initial cut was like 15 and a half minutes long. And when we did a couple passes and brought in some very trusted friends, one in particular, Chris Winterbauer, who went to USC with Steve and has become a dear friend and is a fantastic filmmaker himself, came in and was ruthless in that edit. He said, I'm going to do the ruthless pass. And he just cut every second frame out that could go to give us an 11-minute short film, from 15 and a half minutes down to 11. And then it weirdly felt long because the pace was just like the same. So then Steve and I went back in and added the moments of breath, or the moments that we felt deserved more screen time, and gave it more ebb and flow. And that led us to the like sub 13 version that you see now.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's perfect. It is concise and tight, and so that's wonderful. You were able to get those notes from someone so close to you, and then work from there. So, just for those of you who haven't seen this incredible comedy short film, which go watch it because it's available on YouTube. It's set in England, 1813. Miss Estrogenia gets her period during a long-awaited marriage proposal. Mr. Dickley mistakes the blood for an injury, and it becomes clear that his expensive education has missed a spot. So for everyone listening who hasn't seen it yet, go see it. So let's take it back really quick to the research that you did when you were writing this. I heard there was a Facebook group involved and stories being told.
Yeah, when I had the idea, and it was like on a list of sketch ideas that, you know, Steve and I potentially wanted to make. And for some reason, this one just kept nagging at my subconscious for a while until I started to follow it. And I was pursuing opera at the time largely, and I was in this Facebook group of female opera singers that had sort of become this just generally sisterhood support group through that industry and also in life. Really wonderful group of women. And I posted in there just asking for funny period stories to help inspire the sketch. The response was this long comment thread of so many people giving funny period stories and very heartbreaking stories, and feeling like they were getting things off their chest, and feeling like they were talking about things they'd wanted to talk about for a long time, and sharing things about their bodies that made me learn something about my body. Anyway, it just went on and on and on. And it was that response that made me think that there was like probably more to this idea than I had initially thought about. And so not only did I start to really self-reflect on my own relationship with my own period and the role of menstruation in the world, but also on a more practical level, like Steve and I had been talking about looking for a project that we could really push ourselves artistically and put more of ourselves into. And so the more I followed this thread, the more it became clear that like, oh, this might be the thing that we could really say something with, that we could be really cinematic with, that we could be our normal, funny, silly, stupid selves. It just kind of had everything that we wanted to make that would represent us and the kinds of bigger things that we want to make down the line. So it led us on this path. Steve was on board, found his own way into the story. Obviously, Steve probably does not menstruate.
Yeah, I don't menstruate. Yes, that's true. I probably don't menstruate.
I didn't want to presume.
haven't yet, but never say never, I guess. But yeah, the longer we have a feature version, and the longer form version has this wonderful arrival point at the end that's just really beautiful, and it's about a person who feels like the truth of her reality is being squashed and being oppressed, and she has to stand up in front of the world and refute that and speak her truth publicly. And as a gay person, I deeply identified with that. I don't menstruate, but I still deeply identified with the necessity of speaking your truth as a means of stepping out of your own shame, as a means of opening your own spirit to be able to communicate through this thing that you haven't wanted to talk about. So, I mean, I felt such a deep connection to that. I still do. That, I mean, from the time I read that longer draft, I have just been like, we have got to get this made in any form that we can. We just have to tell this story. Yeah, so that's how I'm here. And then, of course, we did, in terms of other research, I feel like we one of the common curiosities about this project is like, well, what did people really do, and what did people know back then? And so we've spent a lot of time trying to find out, and it's amazing how little there is about what people did to deal with their periods in the Regency era.
There seems to be like this gap because there weren't any major like innovations with regards to like periods during this time. So there was like 50 years before there was something, and then like in the 1860s the first commercial pad was invented by a man, I might add. And
so it wasn't effective. That's probably what it was.
It looks like a contraption, I will say.
No.
When you see like early drawings of it. But during this time, like sort of funnily enough, like literally nobody talked about it. So
or wrote anything down.
Like, there's a few books, like a handful of books that like some say they had some version of tampons, some say they didn't, some say only prostitutes used them, some say that those weren't a part of anything. Other people say they, just folded pieces of fabric and squeezed their thighs together. Other people say they tied it with a string. Anyway, so but there's really not a lot, and there's no consensus as far as we can tell on the historical, record of what women did about this stuff.
That is wild. I can't even imagine going through it at that day and age, and how different everyone's cycles are. Some people could be like laid out, and what if like your job was to work and you didn't have the option of just hunkering down at home, and you had to be out there working. And yeah, it's difficult to think about. And so, and for this project, you have a very special credit. What? A menstruation credit consultant.
We never know,
right.
By the way, when people start talking about this, we never know if we're about to talk about Snow White the chicken or Emma Thompson.
Oh, we can get into both. I was thinking Emma Thompson, but the chicken is important too.
Yeah, because people always are like, "Oh, you have this very fun," and it's like, "Oh, what's it going to be?" Anyways,
wouldn't it be funny if we had a chicken named Emma Thompson and that's who we were crediting?
Right.
Yeah, that would be an opportunity.
Maybe that was the chicken's name.
Maybe on the future you'll get.
I can't remember. In the credits, is it Snow White the chicken as herself? Is that what we have in the credits, or is it Snow White the chicken as Snow White the chicken?
Certain. No, I'm almost certain it's as herself. Yeah.
Okay, that's very
hilarious.
Funny. That's definitely what it should be.
Man, watch it.
So yeah, So not the chicken. How did you get Emma Thompson on?
Right. Refocus.
Well, we had wanted to, even before the Oscars were even on our radar, we had entertained the idea of trying to get the film to her anyway, just because she was such an inspiration, so clearly an inspiration to us, Sense and Sensibility, but also her screenplay and diaries, which is published about the making of Sense and Sensibility, and her spirit. Anyway, just if you know anything about Emma Thompson, you're like, wow, that makes sense that they would want to get this film to her. And so we'd entertained the idea of just trying to get it to her. We didn't really know how that was going to happen. But then once we won the Oscar qualifying award at Aspen, and we were like, are we going to go for this? This seems crazy for a comedy. But then when we decided to, kind of like why not? If you have the opportunity, we had heard that a lot of short films on their Oscar run will reach out to A-listers or high-profile people and ask them to come on as executive producers of the film, not to do anything in particular except just put their name on it and help get press and help kind of shine a spotlight on the project. So we were like, well, let's reach out to Emma Thompson and see if she'd be willing to come on as an executive producer for our Oscar run. And so we wrote her this whole letter, and we were able to just reach out to her reps and get it to her through her reps at CAA, everyone's favorite blank webpage. And
that is a feat for people who don't know. To get the CAA email of their rep is a feat. And then for it to get read and sent off, it's an accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, we were very surprised when she responded through her agent, within 3 days. She was like, I watched your film. And she wrote us the nicest, funniest, most perfect note anyone could have ever written, I think, given the film that we made. I mean, I think it included the line, my atrophied uterus rose up in triumph and fist bumped me after I watched your film, or something like that. It was so charming and witty and sort of in the spirit of our film. Also in that note, she said, I am politely declining the executive producer credit because I didn't have anything to do with the making of your film. And she said, I have a lot of producer friends who it would just feel sort of disingenuous for me to take on a literal producing credit on a film that I had no hand in the making of it. So she said, however, if you wanted to give me a title that's in the spirit of your film, that is funny, that clearly indicates you have my blessing, I would be very happy with something like executive menstrual advisor. And we were like, you got it, Dame Emma Thompson. So now she is credited as our executive menstrual advisor.
And it's clearly so perfect for her. And, she's such a perfect person to endorse this film.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a total tangent, but it just popped in my head when you were talking about that. I mean, when we were talking early on, we were working on the script. We were just daydreaming on Emma Thompson. I went to a used bookstore. I found a copy of of Emma Thompson's screenplay and diaries, and it was signed. So there were just all of these little magical things. So anyway, I have a signed copy of that, and it's one of my treasured possessions.
Oh my gosh.
That's incredible.
So amazing.
We're hoping to manifest that with Jane Fonda, because we have something coming up with Jane Fonda.
Yeah,
so we're manifesting all of that for Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda is our Emma Thompson.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so with the Oscars, let's pivot onto the Oscars. When did that word start appearing into your, vocab with this film?
Wow.
In April of 2024.
Okay.
It was planted into our brains by Paul Sloop, who's a programmer at the Cleveland International Film Festival. We played there. We won the audience award, and he called us to tell us, because I went the first weekend when we screened, but we weren't there for the award stuff. And so Julie and I happened to be together, and he called us to tell us that we had won that award. And he communicated something to us that we didn't know at the time, but that, there's this difference between juried awards at festivals and audience awards. And he thought that even though we were we won the audience award and we went on to win more audience awards, that he thought that our film was an awards film, an awards contender, and that we should consider pursuing that path. And again, we were kind of like, oh, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
it turned into Go on.
We didn't even, I mean, again, I don't think I'm going to assume nobody makes a film thinking they're going to get to the Oscars. I mean, and certainly not us who made a comedy about periods. But we were at Cleveland, we had won the audience award, but we were also the first runner up to the jury award.
Yeah.
And the jury award is Oscar qualifying. So the film that won it qualified for the Oscars. But we were like, that's funny that we were that close to that Oscar qualifying award, given the film that we've made.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul explained that. He's like, you guys were in the mix for the Oscar qualifying award. And we were like, whoa, that's so crazy. Like, we never even thought about that. And then the more festivals we went to after that, like, you know, we would always lose the jury award to a drama, a gritty, like some sort of gritty drama, which are typically the films that people regard as quote unquote awards films. And those are the ones that usually win the jury awards. It almost never goes to a comedy. But we were hearing that we were in the mix for some of those jury awards. And so we kept kind of being like, that's weird. I wonder if and Paul, and we've stayed in touch with Paul Sloop throughout our entire journey. He's been a huge supporter of ours because he's really was one of the first people to believe in us. And he said, you know, you might have something here. Not a lot of comedies have as much heart and are as kind of artistic as yours. He's like, you might kind of have a combination here that Academy voters might really respond to. Because he said they actually tend to skew closer to the audience awards, which I thought was really interesting. That was, you know, it was his voice and a couple other programmers along the way who were really, really supportive. Those voices were the ones that made us, were so encouraging that we were like, all right, well, let's, if we have the opportunity, let's go for it. And that's what we did.
Then it took a whole year. I mean, it took till the following April before we actually won a qualifying jury award. And we ended up winning in Aspen Shorts Fest, the only qualifying jury award in the world for comedy. Every other festival in the world has a qualifying narrative award. So there's literally only one that was for comedy. And that's what allowed this journey to continue.
That makes sense why it's so hard too, to like, you know, get an Oscar qualifying for comedies if there's only one. Yeah. So you get into your Oscar campaign. Like, what does that look like? What have you been?
How did that shift your journey?
Sorry, I just have to tell this quick story because I was not, even though I'm from Colorado, I was not at Aspen. I was like in Denver with my family at a baby shower, and Steve and Julia called me and they're like, we just won at Aspen. And so I started like freaking out in the living room at my Auntie Carla's house. And I was like, oh my God, we're Oscar qualified. And my family's like, oh, you got the Oscar? And I was like, oh, no, but wow, I don't even know how to describe this because it's like, we didn't even know at that point, like what it was, but I knew what it meant, but I was like, I don't even know how to put it in a cute little sentence right now for everybody that's watching me freak out. And I was like, no, we've got quite the road ahead of us, but my God, we're so much closer. So yeah, it's been quite the camp. And, you know, I've been obsessed with the Oscars since I was a little kid because like, obviously growing up in Wyoming, that was basically the only entry point I had. Because again, we didn't have cable. We only had the major stations. And so like my mom probably put it on one year and I was like, so anyway, so the Oscars have always been, but like to learn about this whole campaign process has been completely fascinating. So I already forgot what the initial question was.
No, how did you? The question is, how did you navigate that? What's the process? Let us know.
We've likened it many times to building the plane while you're flying it. Especially for us. I mean, there are people who have done this before, who have done this multiple times. There are people for whom this is their bread and butter. This is most certainly, for the three of us, our first time doing any of it. So happy to share any and everything we've learned because nobody tells you anything. But it has been, so there's three phases. You know, you go from winning an Oscar qualifying award or having a qualifying theatrical run. And then that puts you on what's called the long list, which is, depending on the year, a certain amount of films. This year it was 207 films, which we hear it was like the most it's ever been. It's an incredibly long list. And then the voters vote to put 15 of those on the short list. And then the voters vote to put 5 of those on the nomination list. And now we wait to hear who the voters pick as the one.
Yeah. And I think when did we apply for I think they open up like for applications to actually like be on the long list and stuff, I think starts in what, like,
July?
I feel like it was
May?
summer. Yeah, July
May?
or
Okay,
August.
July.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who
Oh,
knows?
so
But-
after you are, win an Oscar qualifying category, you then have to apply to still be considered.
Yes.
yes.
To say
Yeah.
like, hey, we want to be considered. Like we qualified to
Mm.
be considered, and then we said, yes, we would like to be considered.
And here's the paperwork saying how we qualified, and you have to, yeah.
And then there are some people who also apply who don't do literally anything. Like there was a nominee last year who their producer has been really gracious with her time at certain points along this journey, because I was put in touch with her and I'm like, tell me everything you know. What is this? Literally this conversation we're having right now. And she was like, we didn't do anything. And then suddenly we found ourselves on the short list. And then we started campaigning.
Wow.
And then there are other people who apply and like campaign the whole time. So it seems to, from what we can tell, it can really run the gamut of like, you can spend $0 or you can spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, or you can get a streamer to pick you up, or you can do grassroots the whole time, or whatever. There really doesn't seem to be any one way to do it. As we have learned, like the strategy does shift from phase to phase. Again, we learned all of this while we were in the thick of it. Like going from long list to short list, you're in a group of 207 and you have to stand out. You just have to like be visible. And it was during that phase that Emma Thompson came on, that we had reached out to Emma Thompson, and she came on and we got a Hollywood Reporter article about her joining our film. And I think that was very, very helpful, just again, in shining a spotlight on our film in the sea of 207, to just make people pay a little more attention when they watched our film, maybe, is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got on the short list, then what was it?
Before you go into the thing I was going to add about the Emma Thompson thing is that, again, as a comedy about menstruation, I think when someone like Emma Thompson, 2-time Oscar winner, Dame Emma Thompson, says this movie has legitimacy, that really helps. It helps a film like it helps a comedy. It helps people slow down and really take it in and see what it's doing, rather than just breezing through it or overlooking it because they assume that it's not something of substance. So I think that was very helpful for us.
Yeah, it
Because
gave it
also-
some gravitas. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And also during that phase, like for what we understand of like how the voting works, like voters are assigned batches of that long list. And I think because there were so many films, like each batch of voter had to watch 40 short films and then vote on their like top 5 or top 50. I'm not even sure exactly what they did, but everybody had to watch 40 short films.
It's a lot.
Which is a lot of short films. My mind is still boggled by like festival programmers who have to watch gazillions of short films.
And then that's one person. And if you're not their cup of tea,
Then
Yeah.
yeah.
And when we got shortlisted, which by the way, you're announced on the shortlist on December 16th. So it's right before everybody goes on holiday break. And like all of us were in different corners of the world. Oh, what were we going to say?
I was going to say, also happens to be Jane Austen's 250th birthday
yes.
this year,
Also,
this past year.
yeah.
Was.
Kismet.
So
Oh,
there
there
was-
were
I
so
know.
many
Wow.
things aligning.
Jane Fonda.
Yeah. And so we found out we were shortlisted on December 16th, and it was like right before all of us went to different corners of the world to obviously like spend our holidays with our loved ones and stuff. And it was like, oh my God, what do we do? And like everybody's just like available, not available, like so something that like, again, there's so many different routes that you can take in this campaign trail. And I think the thing that we know best about our movie, which I know a lot of people are going to say about their movie too, is that it screens very well in a theater with an audience. And like, especially with a comedy, it's like when you're with people, it gives you permission to laugh. Whereas like you might not feel that way when you're just watching it by yourself. So something that we all decided on was like, let's focus on screenings. Like, let's get as many people as we can into rooms together to watch this film so that the buzz can kind of start from that. Because like that's, and we knew that obviously from all the festivals that we were playing in, that it's just like, again, like watching a comedy with an audience is always going to be the best experience you could possibly have. And so for us, it was like, rather than spending, so much money on ads, or like, again, like there are just like so many opportunities in so many different ways that you can reach people. But for us, it was always really like, we knew from all of our festivals that it was like, we know that people love watching this movie in a big theater with other people, and that is where we do our best. So that was something that we focused on, was like, let's, you know, like figure out what screening rooms are most important for us along the way. So we got, you know, we were very strategic about that in the shortlisted phase, which, I mean, obviously, I mean, like it paid off because then we got nominated, which is still, you know, incredible.
Yeah,
we
definitely don't have the deepest pockets in our category, and we don't have the same kind of industry muscle behind us that some of the other nominees have. So we've had to be a little bit more targeted, or just like smart about where we put our small budget. But also kind of funnily enough, coming from making a bunch of YouTube sketches and musical sketches, that I think was a skill that Steve and I learned during that time, which is like, okay, if you have $500, where do you put it so that it shows up on screen? And somehow like that skill has continued to translate into even our Oscars campaign, where we're like, okay, we have these parameters.
Make the most of it.
Parameters, but how do we maximize what we do have? And like Ellie was saying, you know, we had a choice to either like buy a bunch of ad space or pay for a bunch of publicity, or we could take that money and try to cultivate communal experiences in LA, New York, London. Steve and I went from Palm Springs to LA to London to New York to LA within the span of 7 days.
Wow.
Because we also wanted to be there, you know, like we wanted to represent our film, and I think that was a decision that we all felt really good about in that phase, because it felt like it was really true to us and to our film.
Yeah, and before it's funny that you say that, and it is brilliant for your film, I think too, because before it went on YouTube and we had gotten the link to do research for this project, I was gonna watch it, and Jessica's like, do not watch it. I want to be there with you. I want to see your face. Yeah. And I was like, what? Come on, I want to see it. And she's like, no, we're getting together. Yeah. Do not watch it without me. And it's so fun. It's so funny.
I
Together.
was able to see it beforehand. It was a Women in Film screening, or they were one of the partners that you guys reached out to at the CAA agency, and it was packed theater.
You were asking it. Yes, that was
and everyone was like dying. It was so great. So then whenever we, you know, got the approval to like interview you all, and we got the link, I was like, Mo, you are not watching it by yourself. I
was so excited. She was like, don't you dare. Don't you wait, I'll see you in 2 days. You better wait. And then we saw it at another screening together with you guys. So totally agree.
There's no better way.
Yeah,
of course. No, there's no better way. Yeah, no better way to see a comedy. You have to see it with people.
Yeah. Jessica we like keep tapping each other like, did you hear the name of that character? Because you know, everything is so purposeful. There were so many just like nuggets of good laughter, but everything had a place. Like nothing was too much. It was all perfect in that world. Selfishly, so we are crowdfunding for our first feature together, and so we wanted to ask you personally, do you have any advice for new filmmakers embarking on their first big project? Because we have a lot of audience members like that too.
I think back on the thing that I'm most proud of with this short to this day is still that we were able to recognize that this was the idea worth putting all the eggs in the basket for. And then we really did put all the eggs in the basket, because we were like, let's find out what happens if we put all the eggs in one basket and just go for it in a way that we've never gone for anything before. And then we did. And we ended up being able to make the film that we set out to make, which I don't think happens, you know, that so many, you know, any film is a miracle, and like so many things can go wrong. And so the fact that we were we got the most amazing cast. We met Ellie, like the timing was horrible and also a gift, and so many little miracles happened along the way. And Steve and I prepped like crazy, like we've never pushed ourselves before in an artistic sense. And the result was a film that like I still really like, and that I'm really proud of. And before any of the festival stuff, before any of the Oscar stuff, when it was just us sitting in our editing room in an office looking at the final product and going, that's the thing we made. I feel really good about it. And regardless of the response. So like, I don't know, it's sort of, I personally want to keep following that. And I would encourage everybody else to, I don't know, it's so hard to make the thing you set out to make, but if you can recognize if you can try to listen to your intuition. I think we listen to our intuition a lot in all this, try to quiet our minds and like follow our guts with a lot of this, like this idea versus another idea.
Yeah, I also think that sentiment is really important too, because I mean, look at you're 3+ years later and you're still out here talking about it and celebrating it and like endorsing it. And so the fact that you all can still stand behind it, I mean, obviously it's Oscar nominated, you would have to stand behind it, but I mean, like beyond that, it's just a matter of like quality. Even if you weren't able to get that recognition, it's there.
You're totally right. And it is like, especially like when you're doing press like this, it could get really exhausting to talk about the same thing over and over and over again. And like we just were in a meeting the other day where we had to pitch the feature version, the story of the feature version. And I have always dreaded pitching, always. I've just always been like, oh, whenever we're starting to pitch these features, I'm going to have a hard time. And it was not hard at all. And it wasn't hard at all because we believe in it. We really deeply believe in both the message of the film and the characters and the world and the story. You know what I mean? So, I mean, there's just something to finding those things that are easy for you to be behind because you just organically have faith in them and you love them. I mean, I think that's ultimately what it is, right? It's a pursuit of love. And I think we both all three of us really love this story and we love what we're saying with it. And we love the way we're saying that thing. And so it becomes much easier to talk about and promote for years.
You guys know it's like you have to spend so long with every project in film that like hopefully you really love it. And sometimes you don't, I guess, but hopefully you do.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing is that like you really have to have that much passion behind it because it's like there are so many voices in the room and there are going to be plenty of opportunities where filmmakers or creators are kind of like forced into this commercialized spot. But it's like at the end of the day, you still need to be able to speak on why you think a choice should be the certain choice that it is. And not because like everything has to be a confrontation or that. But again, like there are so many people that want a piece of your sugar, as my friend Jared and I always say. And it's like and it's like at the end of the day, you have to know like that they have their own motives behind it. And it's like your integrity as an artist is to like come back to it and be like, okay, well, this is what I wanted to say. And again, you're not always going to get your way, but it's just like having that strength and having that moral compass in those moments where there are so many people just trying to get a piece of the pie. You've got to talk to as many people as possible. And like, even though it feels like, oh my God, like this person is offering me money, like you just have to kind of think about like, where is that money coming from? Like, is it a thing that you're going to feel good about having them?
Are they in the Epstein files? Like,
right.
Let's do our research here.
And literally, it's just like dating too. Like,
money from him ever.
Right. Because then you have to think about, do you want this person on set with you? Like even if they're there for 10 minutes for their stupid little set visit, do you want them in your vicinity? And it's like, sometimes it's like, yes, you can tolerate that. But sometimes you're like, no, I never want to hear this voice again. And so anyway, again, just coming back to where you are rooted. And even though it's hard because it's like, we live in this like very dog eat dog industry, but we just have to.
We do. Yeah. We do say a lot, like not all money is equal. The same dollar amount from different places is a very different thing because it really depends on the intentions of the people behind the money. The other thing I think that we're trying to be mindful of as we move in the direction of feature land is also what is the end game? What is the distribution going to look like? Because again, for us, theaters and the theatrical experience, communal laughter is so important. And if we were to get into a contract and sign off on something, not knowing what's going to happen once the film is made and going out into the world, that could be a huge mistake. So I think it's really easy when you're trying to put somebody together to be focused on all the immediate pieces, but you have to be seeing where's the film going to end up. You've got to be thinking about that. And who's going to help you? Who's going to help you get it out into the world in the way that you want it out in the world?
Yeah, it's that whole thing about you said about, being as prepared as you can be and trying to think about all these things, but then being able to meet those, those Ellies when they come across and just, and like, I'm going to shoot this next month and fuck, we need a producer. Like, when, and, just being able to make those quick decisions, but also have the foresight of we have a game plan that we're working from collectively.
Yeah. I will say the other thing that we've learned along the way, the hard way, is that if you have a choice between someone who's incredibly enthusiastic about you and your film, or somebody else who's less enthusiastic, but maybe at a more prestigious place, I think next time I would go with the more enthusiastic person at the less prestigious place, because that is the staying power. Mm-hmm. And that's like the type of person that's going to fight for you in a way that somebody who's maybe a little less passionate about, but maybe has more, on paper muscle behind them. Like, if they don't fight for you, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. It's the same thing. They have enthusiasm because they believe in it. And it's a lot easier to pitch something and to push things through when you believe authentically in the thing.
Yeah. Follow the passions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, we have to wrap up, although we could go on forever. Seriously, I love talking to you all. Thank you all so much for coming on the Get Set podcast and speaking with us. Jane Austen's period drama is now streaming on YouTube, or actually, please go see it in theaters if you can find it near you. Yeah, because a communal laugh is what we need, especially in these times. Right now, video on YouTube, though, has over 171,000 views. So if you want to bump that up, go see it in theaters and then watch it 3 times at home, help us out. The link for that is going to be in our bio down below, or in the show notes down below. And where else can people follow you guys on your creative journey? Do you do socials? Can we point them in a direction?
The film has an Instagram at Jane Austen's period drama, where we're keeping everybody abreast of the journey. And then we each have our own individual Instagrams. Mine is at Jaxicle, Jaksicle.
I'm at Steve C. Pinder.
And I am at le-ger-ski, LEGERSK.
Perfect. And we'll have those down below in the show notes as well.
Yes, amazing. And the Oscars are going to be this Sunday, March 15th at 4 p.m. Pacific time on ABC and streaming on Hulu, hosted by Conan O'Brien. So that's going to be so fun. We are so excited for you and the entire cast and crew of Jane Austen's period drama. So congratulations from the Get Set podcast.
Yes, including Snow White the Chicken.
Much.
We're excited for you. All right,
Thank
now
go
Get Set.
Wait, hold the phone. Just not if you're driving. Jess and I are creating our first feature film, and we are finally ready to tell you about it.
Not only that, but we're ready to get you involved.
Picture this. Based on true life events of Jessica's mom, in the 1970s, Jean's husband and father of their child up and leaves in the middle of the night, files for divorce, and her struggle to get a credit card in her own name becomes history-making news story.
Sound familiar?
Gosh, I hope not. With themes of womanhood, equity, activism, friendship, and identity, this film is too important not to get made, and not to get made well. So please help us do that.
Yep, it's happening.
Yeah, we're so into it, and as cheesy as it sounds, we hope you are too. But don't worry, we're not raising all the funds right now. We definitely need financiers to come in and help us with that. But in the meantime, we're raising funds for legal fees, a casting director, and development costs to help propel us into pre-production.
So, if you like Erin Brockovich,
and you're all about the fight for women's equality like Good Girls Revolt,
and the complex character relationships of Lady Bird,
and the investigative journalism of All the President's Men,
or if you just love Naomi.
Yeah, this one's for you.
It is.
So, whether you like, share, donate, email it to your grandma, literally all of it helps. So please help us reach our goal and
help us
get set.
The campaign is live on Seed and Spark, and link is down in the show notes below. The Get Set podcast is created, edited, and produced by Jessica Payne and Monique Schwaneman of Old Girls Entertainment. Original music composed by the incredibly talented Kyle Hall. You can follow him on social media at Kyle Hall Music.
If you vibe with this episode and our mission of bringing to light different career paths in the industry, especially for women, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share us with a friend. Thanks, friends.